Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. I'm here today in my corner. I've got, I love saying that, in my corner, Aisha Ali Khan, who's a campaigner and mother and activist for equal rights and just generally for equality for all. And I've also got with me Councillor Nusrat Mohammed, who's a mother, a campaigner, and obviously is working tirelessly for positive change in our communities. So hopefully you've been with us all the way through. If you haven't, welcome. And we're talking about gender equality, International Women's Day. Why are we still campaigning for change actually? Why don't we have equality? What are the reasons for that? And we are slowly going to get to some ideas that we have for making it better. It is a live show, so if you want to join us, the number's on the bottom of the screen, and please just call in and let us have your name and your question. Do we have gender equality or are we regressing? So welcome back, and thank you again for giving us this time. So prior to the break, we were talking about role models, and we were talking about role models at home. And one of the things we started talking about is the what I call the pampered prince phenomena. So, you know, boys are cherished in our cultures to the detriment of the girls actually sometimes.
Sometimes,
Sometimes, yeah.
And that potentially in many cases is resulting in, and we've seen an increase in violence from in the home, so domestic violence and abuse generally, but also from young men towards their parents, mums usually, but also the dads.
Yeah.
Now, I've also worryingly heard other mums blaming mums, you're the one who spoiled your son. So the question that I'd put to you here, then whose job is it? Is it mum's job alone to raise a well-adjusted, respectful young man? And is she alone to blame for spoiling him when all of our society, you know, is saying that we value boys, we want male children, and therefore, you know, they're the apple of our eye? Sometimes they're equally the apple of the eye with other girls. Not everyone's, you know, like that, but where is the role of dads in modelling positive behaviours?
Yeah. I think, first of all, women get blamed for a heck of a lot more than they should. And I think whether you have a son who's successful, if he's successful, it's because his, you know, his dad's had an input or other male members. If he's bad, mum spoilt him or whatever. And I have seen this a lot actually, where you do get the odd person going off the rails, but it's always the mum's fault. So I think it's really important that we kind of highlight that this kind of responsibility and blaming and so on, it's not just the mum's responsibility to raise a family. Fathers need to take a really active role, but not just fathers, other male role models within our community, neighbours, uncles,
Elected members.
Absolutely.
Elected members, Maulana Sahibs and everybody else. So it's actually a responsibility across the board that, and men, generally speaking, boys need male role models. I have a son, mashallah, 13 years of age, and when he was about 7 or 8 years old, he was behaving very badly, very bad. He was literally getting into trouble in school all the time, and it caused me a lot of stress actually, and I realised that this is the time that his dad needed to step in and take responsibility. And I was very lucky actually that my we were divorced by then, my ex-husband actually was more than happy to step in and say, yes, this is my responsibility and I'm going to take over now, which he did. And now, mashallah, my son, if you compare him to what he was when he was 8 years old, completely different. What we're seeing is, we haven't really touched upon this, but our society, we have a lot of single parent families in our society, and these women, and majority of them are single moms, and they're raising children, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, however many number of children they have, they're raising these children single-handedly, and there's very little male role models in these children's lives, and it's really messing up young children, young boys especially, because they feel lost. They have psychological and emotional problems, they feel something's missing, and then also they have rejection issues as well when their fathers are not interested in their children. And these are issues after divorce, and sometimes even when they're not divorced, they're just not interested, they've got their lives outside of the family home and they're getting on with them. And I think we as a community now need to take a step back and say, actually, what is happening here? You know, we have so many children, so many boys going into prison, going into, you know, getting involved in drugs, in criminality, all sorts of things that, you know, had they had somebody there to say, actually, no, this isn't acceptable, and this is the sort of behaviour this you should be, you know, modelling the behaviour that they want children
I mean, that is
model.
one factor that can help. Obviously, I mean, the demise into or the fall into drugs and criminality quite often can be fueled with other things, and identity is one of them, and sense of belonging. So if people don't feel they've got an identity and they haven't got somewhere to belong, that's a factor. Obviously, austerity and opportunity, lack of education, all of those things can, you know, kind of land us there. But I suppose a broader question then is, in terms of women having people to look up to and being able to be strong and empowered, and this isn't about women who work having more value than women who stay home and have a value. That's not absolutely. I mean, I have two sisters who don't work, and one's never ever worked, one did, and then she decided, now I'm focusing on my family. So, you know, so long as it's an active, assertive choice, it's to be respected and absolutely valued and cherished, because, you know, they're giving to society, like I said at the beginning of the show, in their own way. But then where do women look to? You know, have we got good representation in terms of, you know, senior positions in education, in politics, in, you know, who do they see when they go out and about? How do they aspire for themselves and their children? You know, what inspires them to want more for them and for their children?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that I got involved in politics, because I wanted to be a role model to the other women around me, and particularly on a more personal level for my girls, that they can choose any career that they want to go into as long as they work hard. In terms of having a representation, I think we've got our foot on the ladder. We've got our foot on the ladder in terms of there are some really charismatic, intelligent women in key roles. But I think it's really tough for, as you said, for women who are single parents and are having issues at home to sort of aspire. It's always sort of seen as if, oh, that's not me, she's probably got the perfect life. And one thing that I find when I'm out and about in the community and I go to constituents' home, and it's particularly women that will ring me and say, look, sister, can you come and see me? And even before they go into their own personal issues, they'll be like, how do you do it? And the first assumption is that I have no children. I have no added responsibility, hence Nusrat, you're able to function. And once I get into the whole story of, well, I've got 5 kids and I'm a carer for my mum, and, you know, I fulfill all these different roles. And it's really an eye-opener for them to think, oh, okay, and how do you manage it, sort of thing. And sometimes I think it's equipping our young people out there to say that, look, you can have this and you can have this if you aspire to it, and look at this role model and this role model that they're doing it. But you have to be a team player to be able to do something like that. You have to have the skills to identify the tools that you're going to need to be a success, not in the role, not just in the role that you choose outside of your home, but within your home as well. And it is actually doable. It is doable.
With a lot of discipline and hard work.
Absolutely.
I mean, this weekend I was saying to my sister, I can't make any more time, so I'm going to just give up on the housework. Because it's just like, well, what can give, you know, if you're sort of doing 12-hour days kind of thing, and you're coming home and you're still carrying on, and then it's just you want to collapse, so what gives? And I was just like, well, that's it. My house is, you know, sliding mat, it's going to become a hovel again, you know, whatever. That's how I'm going to make more time. But what I wanted to just touch on there with you guys as well is, yes, we can have women in public life.
Absolutely.
Some people make it, and we should, absolutely. We, you know, I think it's fair to say we haven't got equal representation in Parliament. We haven't got equal representation in the think tanks. We haven't got equal representation in policy development. It is changing, you know, and women's voices are being heard more. We've got a Women's Equality Party, you know. It's surprising in 2017 we need that. You know, their aim is to improve you know, representation in political spheres. That's their manifesto, and once they're done, they're done.
In Bradford we have a leader of the council, that's a woman. We have a chief executive, that's a woman. We have a really good representation on council by women, not just Muslim women, but
in general,
women across the board. So I think, as I keep saying, I don't want to take it above saying that we've got a foot on the ladder, because
Yeah.
sometimes when you see and you think, well, okay, you've got X amount of women on council, you know, you've got 2 key roles that are fulfilled by women, you've done it now, and it's a case of, no, we haven't done it.
No,
We haven't done it, but we're definitely aiming to
Yeah.
get there.
Absolutely. So my question then was, actually, when women have made it, and they're like Theresa May, so we've got a
Yeah.
you know, female prime minister
Yeah.
at the moment, and we've got other key, you know, figures, Nasha, MP Nasha in Bradford.
Absolutely.
But if I think about the amount of vitriol and hatred some women in senior positions get, you know, from general public, from Joe public, and from anonymous public, because people
Yes.
won't, you know, and I think that's another dimension. And how do we address that? Because particularly with the advent of social media, you know,
Definitely.
women just get, I mean, it's called trolling basically, so women just get so much
Yeah.
nastier
Absolutely.
comments made to them
Absolutely.
than men. So is that fair?
No, it isn't actually. And somebody, as somebody who's been a victim of severe online bullying, you know, many people know my story. I stood up for myself against a group of men who wanted to basically put a certain narrative about me out there, and they expected, because I was a woman, a Muslim woman, a Pakistani woman, to just completely disappear and hide away, and because I chose not to, and I chose to fight my corner, and you know, I began legal proceedings and so on. They were shocked, because they've never had a woman who's basically stood up for herself, and then I had to carry on fighting this fight for 3.5 years until, alhamdulillah, I won, you know, settled my case and managed to clear my name in a way. But those 3.5 years, I basically was subjected to the most vicious accusations, language, online trolling, people contacting my family, my parents, my dad, my brothers, and so on. And I remember a phone call, and I'm not going to go into the proper names, but my dad received a phone call, and the phone call was along the lines of, you need to control your daughter. As a Muslim man, it's your duty to control your daughter, and because you're not controlling your daughter, you're a bad Muslim. And that kind of language, that in fact, that just inspired me even more to carry on fighting.
Absolutely.
Because it's that kind
Absolutely.
of mentality that you're fighting, and you're kind of trying to actually say, hang on a second, you're not going to get away with this. And I remember another incident came up actually. My Puppiji had passed away, and everybody had gathered, and I had an Auntie G, and basically she said the whole thing about what's going on, and I explained to her that I'm fighting this legal battle, etc., and it's still carrying on. It's very difficult, but inshallah, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And she turned around and she said, you're wasting your time, you should give up. You know, in our culture, in our society, you know, women never win against a man. Men will always win. So you're wasting your time, you're not going to win, and just accept it and move on. And I think that in itself told me a great deal about my sort of the culture, the society, the family where you know, women have been raised in. And I just wanted to actually say, actually, no, I'm not going to give up. And that might have been the norm in, say, a remote village in Pakistan, or maybe in you know, South Asian countries, but not in the UK. Why are we still having these conversations in 2013 at the time it was? But that, again, it inspired me to carry on fighting. And we do need to see more women in political positions. We do need to see a lot more women just generally getting out there and being part of the whole narrative about making decisions about their own future.
Absolutely.
Laws affect everybody.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the Istanbul Convention bill that is basically passed the third reading, and it's going to go to Lords now to be debated upon. And when that is passed, actually, that will protect women and men from domestic violence. And across, you know, the communities, whether you're white or you're Pakistani or you're Indian, it's going to protect everybody. And these are the sort of conversations we need to be having and getting involved in, because it affects us and it benefits us as well. So I really am a great champion, a great believer of political engagement, women getting out there, supporting one another. I think along the way we've had a lot of women who've got themselves into amazing positions of power, but then they've slammed the doors behind themselves.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher was one of the women that
pulled the ladder up
pulled the
behind
ladder
them,
up, and prevented other women from getting to the same level. And actually, we need to empower each other. Just because you help somebody else up that ladder doesn't mean you're going to then have to give up your spot.
And do you know something that's really interesting, because it's one of my personal philosophies, but it's also really Islamic as well, is that, you know, our risk, you know, our sustenance is given to us.
Yeah, it's already
so
written,
alhamdulillah, I will only get what's mine and you will only get what's yours. So if I
Precisely.
support you, you will be where you're needed to be, and maybe that was what God intended, that I'm supposed to be your helper.
Yeah.
You know, in
And
that
you get more
situation
barakah as well.
Well, exactly, and I find it really strange when people, you know, compete. When I'm sat there thinking, number one, there's just so much to do. We're all busy till the day we die.
Yeah.
Number two, it's just like, well, actually, maybe if we work together a bit more smartly, we'd get more done, and we might have a bit of fun along the way as well. Because I think sometimes.
Is that not about how we nurture our children, how our communities out there are actually nurturing their daughters and their sons? Because, as Aisha said, we have this attitude of, you know, slam the door behind you. Where does this come from? I think we need to start digging a little bit deeper, because we talk about the law and how the law protects us, yet we're finding, regardless of those protections being there for women, we still seem to be staggering behind and not moving along. And I think from a community perspective, I find that when I'm out there in the community, that I'm finding that the model our communities are using to bring their children up is really outdated.
So how do we update it, Nusrat?
We update it by looking at society around us and looking at how we equip our children to function in the society that we're living in, which is the UK.
Recognising, one, that we're not in
Pakistan or
So we can't have a pampered prince syndrome, because that's just not going to work. That's harmful for your brother, for your son.
Well, it leads to entitlement, which actually is quite a horrible thing. And entitlement, by that what we mean is, we see it in all cultures, all communities actually. We've got a swathe of young people, and sadly they do become older people with the same attitude. So it's not just young people, where they feel the world owes them things, and that's their entitlement. You know, they're entitled to be served on by the women folk. They're entitled to, and some women have that as well. But it's unhealthy, because actually you only progress on your own merits, hopefully, you know. Yes, we know discrimination exists and there can be some barriers, but generally, you know, if you're willing to work and you're willing to put a bit of time and effort in, things can change. But where if you sit back and think, I'm owed this, well, who owes you it? That's what I don't understand.
I think the thing is that we need to work from the top down, but we need to start working bottom up as well. And we're missing that, and it goes back to what you said in terms of entitlement, is that, you know, as a community, sometimes we feel that, look, we're allowed to be in this bubble, yet the society owes us. And I think I'm trying to get the message across to our communities that that's not the case. You need to now take responsibility in terms of
this is home.
Yeah.
Make it home.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
It's there's nothing here that's at odds with your religion, and if you really feel it is, I'm pretty certain it says it in our scriptures, you can move, you can migrate. You know, the Prophet did it. If it doesn't work for you, move. But that's not what we're advocating, because, like I said, it's perfectly feasible for us to live a conducive, you know, morally upstanding life here in the UK, contributing, you know, and to the well-being of others and ourselves.
I think it's possible to have deen and to have dunya, but it's how we manage it. And what our understanding of it is.
It's the extremes that are the problem, aren't they? So if you're constantly chasing the fanciest car and the fanciest house, sometimes that's which gets you into trouble. On one hand, it could be drugs and crime. On the other hand, it can be mental, you know,
stress, and
it can be stress.
anxiety.
It can lead to death and divorce, even at the extreme end. But on the other hand, you know, if you're sticking to cultural norms from 1500 years ago, because they're not all religious, and or you know, thousands of years ago in some cases, some of the practices, that's no good for you either, because it's not healthy and you're not responding to the society around you. And one of the things that, you know, I hold quite dear to me is that the Quran is a book for all time. So how can it be a book for all time if we're stuck in a particular part of history? So it's by definition, that is one of its miracles, is that it answers the issues and challenges of
everyday
time.
life.
throughout the
Absolutely.
ages.
Throughout the ages.
Yes,
Totally.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
and that's something that always, you know, and I look, I got shivers when I think about it. I just think that is the miracle of Revelation, isn't it? It's we've been
Subhanallah.
given the guide, how we interpret it, how we use it.
I think,
you know,
for me, what comes to mind is that you have extreme versions of it. It's either the dunya or it's the deen.
Yeah.
And we need to understand the two go hand in hand. Even the Quran is telling us that the two go hand in hand.
Moderation.
and there's moderation
Yeah.
and the middle way, and
Yeah.
I think that is something. So, but the other thing is, I've just said we've got the guidebook, which is the glorious Quran, obviously, but there is also an unwritten guidebook, isn't there, which is partly our cultural norms,
Yes.
some of which is actually quite good and conducive to, you know, health,
Gender
society and
equality
people,
and-
exactly. But some of it isn't.
No.
You know, some of it is to do with maintaining the status quo, keeping power where it is, keeping people where they are, whether it's in the home, whether it's in society. So some of that bullish behaviour sometimes does follow people into the professional lives. That's where we get some of that horrible trolling and stuff, and that sense of
course, yeah.
entitlement.
Yeah, of
You are
course.
not entitled to challenge me because, you know, I've grown up as a pampered prince and that's what I'm allowed to be. And I know I'm being a bit scathing because actually I have lots of really beautiful, fair, kind men in my life, you know, whether it's
We all
work or
have.
home.
Yeah, we all
Exactly. So
have.
it's I don't want it to sound like we're having a go. Equally, there are some challenging behaviours in some of our young men that we need to start to address, because although we're talking generically about gender equality, if we talk about domestic violence, domestic abuse, just in Bradford, or is it West Yorkshire, there's sort of the police deal with 4 incidents every hour. So it's not going away. You know, in this country, 2 women die every week as a result of domestic abuse. If you then look into women who take their own life and commit suicide, that's 10.
Totally. Yeah.
In this day and age, that's too much, and that is usually male violence. So what is coming, and some of that may be identity stuff, some of that may be men feeling they don't have a role, whatever it is. I'm not making excuses, but then some of it is about how we raise,
Absolutely.
you know, respectful children. And that's women being respectful of themselves and others, and men being respectful of themselves and their others.
I think we've mentioned, obviously, we've talked about the role of men and responsibilities of men as well. But as obviously somebody who's a teacher, I am a strong champion of girls getting educated. And at the time when I was growing up, it wasn't the norm for girls to go to college, go to university, become educated, and I had to basically fight every single step of the way. And I just remember my brother saying to me, my eldest brother this is, and he just said, I can only support you to a certain extent, as in with the rest of the family and the community. You have to get the grades, you have to put the effort in, you know, we're going to have to do it together. So alhamdulillah, I got A stars at GCSE, and then I went on to A levels to do my A levels, and I got A's. And then I went on to university. But I remember that struggle was so real for me, and it was such a challenge. And I knew the only way out of it wasn't just a case of getting out of a poverty trap. It was actually to kind of change the mindsets.
Absolutely.
And change our lives. And I knew the only way we could do this is with education. And I think we've kind of gone backwards, because I do, when I go into schools and I see these amazing young, fantastic young girls, and they're kind of not interested in education, they're not interested in getting a career or anything, they're more interested in having the right hair, the right makeup, you know, the right handbags. So we seem to have lost a bit of direction here. And I do kind of say,
Yeah.
but not all girls.
Maybe
Yeah.
distracted
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Maybe distracted a little bit.
But what that brings to mind for me is that young girls are now trying to fit in to how they perceive their role. And it's a case of, well, if you're educated and you've got a good career, are you likely to get the man? Are you likely to get married? And all these kind of things. So no, you know, that they're not aspiring towards it, because it's a really weird cycle. Because I totally understand what you're saying in terms of when we were growing up. I know when I was growing up, I was really hungry, and it was a case of, you know, I want an education, and I want this, and you know, I sort of nurture my girls in such a way that is the most important thing. You know, until they get, you know, they're not asked to go into the kitchen, they're not asked to do the cooking or the cleaning. They have to do their fair share, but it is a case of this is priority.
It's not expected of you.
Yeah.
I think there's something about maybe it's a kind of privilege, but there's a little bit of maybe the girls are being a bit spoiled. I know it sounds, they're not spoiled, it's they're entitled. As far as everyone should have an education and they're entitled to it, but because it's easier and the battle's not there, those battles come for them later, because there's young women who go to university and then can't find a job. So those battles absolutely come later, but you know, that phase there where if they're in a supportive family, of course you'll go to university, and we had that in our family, because you know, my nieces were going, well, why do we have to do this, why do we have to do that, why do we have to go to university, why do we need this? And I'm saying to them, you know, you don't have to do anything, we'll get your husband at 16, you can stay at home. The look on their faces, because you know, those challenges when we were growing up, and it still is true for some people, getting married at 16 was quite common.
15, 16, my friends.
Unfortunately, and I feel really bad now because we're going to have to just cut off. So I just want to say thank you very much. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have you both back on, because clearly we've got so many other issues to write and talk about. It's been such a pleasure. So inshallah, details of those I can circulate later. Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum.